You finally decided to show up. Bet you don't know how incredibly unpopular you are here in Aurum Alley. This is so satisfying. Aurum Alley! I, Skott, have returned!
NPCs, short for non-playable characters, are essential to gacha games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. They serve as the backbone of the game world, filling it with life, guiding players through the story, and offering quests. Whether as allies, enemies, or even the occasional fan favorite, NPCs can evoke a wide range of emotion from players, sometimes even sparking heated debates within the community. In Hoyo vs Gacha games, NPCs have a unique role that even playable characters can fulfill, but more on that later. In this video, we'll explore how to write and design a likable NPC using two key examples. First, we have the goat himself, Skott, the lone wolf from Honkai Star Rail. Then there's Teppei from Genshin Impact, a character who stirred up quite a reaction with his role in the story. But before diving into these examples, let's clarify what we mean by NPC in this context. Yes, an NPC is any non-playable character, but not every non-playable character fits the scope of this video. We are not focusing on characters confirmed to be playable in the future, or those like Signora, Dottore or Screwlum. Characters who, while unlikely to become playable, have distinct designs and major roles in the narrative. Instead, we'll focus on the everyday NPCs who add depth to the game's world without ever stepping into the spotlight. First, let's look at an example where Hoyoverse, in my opinion, missed the mark with the design and writing of an NPC, Teppei. If you've played Genshin Impact, you might remember him, or maybe you don't, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you. Either way, here's a quick recap of what you need to know about Teppei. Teppei is a minor NPC introduced in the Inazuma storyline as a member of the Resistance, fighting against the Raiden Shogun's oppressive Vision Hunt decree. After some shenanigans here and there, the Traveler, our main character, ends up becoming the captain of the Swordfish 2 unit, which Teppei is a part of. Teppei, eager to prove himself, falls in with some shady figures who offer him a quick path to power. Unfortunately, after using this newfound power, his health rapidly declines, leading to his tragic and untimely death. Now, I personally didn't dislike Teppei as a character. I realized what the writers were doing with him, but there were still issues in my opinion. What exactly makes Teppei a poorly designed NPC? To be fair, the entire Inazuma story arc had its issues, and Teppei was just one part of a larger problem. Players primarily criticize how the Traveler reacted to Teppei's death. Up until this point in the story, the Traveler had rarely shown strong emotional reactions, which is another issue for another video. Like, come on, we finally meet our sibling and couldn't even bother to talk. So when the Traveler seemed deeply affected by Teppei's death, it felt out of place and confusing for many players. The main problem here is the lack of time spent developing Teppei's character and relationship with the Traveler. While the story hints at Teppei's admiration for the Traveler, we don't actually spend much time with him. His arc feels rushed. He's introduced, becomes a part of Swordfish 2, uses the dangerous delusion to gain power, and dies in a short span of time. Afterwards, the Traveler is so mad, they rush to Scaramouche, who was partly responsible for this, and proceeded to walk into the most obvious trap of all time. Come on, man. For many players, this sudden emotional weight didn't feel earned. There are a few factors that are important to make an NPC likable. One very important factor is screen time. While the Traveler did spend time with Teppei in the Swordfish 2 unit, most of that happened off screen. We, as the player, don't really get to see how they grew closer. And the writers at Hoyoverse realized this, because the next notable NPC that was introduced in the main storyline was Dunyasart, who got significantly more screen time than Teppei and was thus better received. Teppei, to be fair, wasn't the only character during the Inazuma arc that didn't get enough screen time. To be honest, to me he was actually more memorable than some playable characters, but that just shows how rushed the entire storyline was. Now, move over Teppei. It is time for the character who we were actually waiting for. Skott is the GOAT, a minor antagonist who somehow managed to become one of the most memorable characters in the entire game in one single patch. I personally can attest to his popularity. After all, it was me who made this Skott edit. that surpassed 100k views a few days ago. And yeah, he's also one of my favorite characters. Well, in my opinion, there are several factors that led to Skott becoming a superstar. He's more of a special case. I personally don't believe that the writers at Hoyoverse themselves expected Skott to become this popular, but some of the writing and design choices definitely were partly responsible. Just like with Teppei, one factor we need to consider is screen time. Skott already got a good amount of screen time during his first event in Aurum Valley a few patches ago, but we got to see much more of him when he returned for the March Hunt event in patch 2.4, which really boosted his popularity. Just to make it clear, not only the amount of screen time is important, but also the quality. What really helps Skott is the fact that because of the 5 different endings, we learn so much about him as a person and see different sides of him. In one ending we explore his ridiculous backstory, in other endings we see him apologize and change as a person, we even see him shitting himself, and in one secret ending he actually wins and afterwards teaches March 7th to become one of the best mech pilots in the entire galaxy. No, I am not joking. Teppei, on the other hand, just kinda showed up and, well, died. We as a player don't know much about him. Now, I am not saying that every NPC needs a lot of screen time or an elaborate backstory to be a functional character. But if the writers want us, the player, to care about said character, at least something is needed. A reason why we and our main character should care about this person. Another key factor we can't overlook is visual design. It's the first thing we notice about any character, and it can instantly tell us so much about their personality, their strength, or even what faction they belong to. And if there's one thing gacha game players out of all people understand, it's just how much visual design matters. Now, can you still write a likable and memorable characters even if they look like a generic NPC? Absolutely. But it's much more challenging. Teppei is a perfect example of this. He has a generic NPC model, which doesn't make him stand out at all. To be fair, this was likely intentional. Teppei is supposed to represent the everyman, an ordinary citizen who gets swept up in events far beyond his control and suffers the consequences. But here is the issue. If Teppei wasn't meant out to stand out visually, he needed to be more memorable in other ways. Whether through a unique personality or a special relationship with a key character. Think of how Dunyasat and Sumeru had a close bond with Deya, or how Navia and Fontaine is connected to her 2 loyal henchmen. Teppei did interact with Kokomi, but I don't remember any of that, and I don't think she gave a single fuck about him. These relationships add depth and help make otherwise ordinary characters feel more significant and impactful. On the other hand, Skott also has a relatively simple design, but it's unique compared to other NPCs in Honkai Star Rail. Just the addition of his round shades gives him a memorable look, even when you compare him with playable characters. This might be one reason why fans quickly latched onto him, creating fan art that portrays Skott as cool or handsome. In fact, this one single edit of Skott without his shades seemed to skyrocket his popularity. It wasn't just that the edit made him look surprisingly handsome, it was the unexpected twist of seeing a petty, antagonistic minor character suddenly become attractive. This is also why the mods of Skott fighting are popular. Don't get me wrong, seeing characters like Danheng, Qingliu or the Raiden Shogun doing cool things or destroying enemies is always fun to watch. But that's exactly what you expect from characters like them. But you know, shit is getting real when a choke character is suddenly becoming cool or getting serious for once. If you watched the anime or read the manga Gintama, you'll know exactly what I mean. It's primarily a comedy series where the cast is usually goofing around and doing silly things. But every now and then, the story takes a serious turn, and the characters you're used to seeing as clowns suddenly become deadly serious. This shift really emphasizes how high the stakes are and makes those dramatic moments hit even harder. If you like to torture yourself, I mean if you like playing fake Grand Order, you've probably heard of the Guda Guda characters like Oda Nobunaga, the infamous Japanese warlord, and Okita Soji from the Shinsengumi. In the game, they are typically portrayed as joke characters, always goofing around in light-hearted events that don't take themselves too seriously. But if you're a fan of these characters, you should definitely check out the manga Fate-type Redlight. It's essentially a retelling of one of the playable Guda Guda events from FGO, but with a twist. This time, characters like Nobunaga and Okita aren't treated as jokes. Instead, they are portrayed as the deadly, psychotic forces they are capable of being. I still remember how shocked a lot of FGO players were when they saw their beloved waifus portrayed in such a serious and terrifying light. Getting back to the main topic, I think this is one of the main reasons why the fan arts, mods and edits of a Joe character like our god Skott became so popular. The official scientific term for this effect, seeing a Joe character suddenly become cool, is called Gatmo, by the way. Furthermore, beyond his visual design, Skott shows an unexpected amount of depth for a minor antagonist. Thanks to the multiple endings, we get to see different sides of his character. But that alone isn't what makes Skott likable. What really draws people in is that every time we learn something new about him, it only makes him more hilarious. For example, when we dive into his past, you'd think the typical reveal would be a tragic backstory that explains his personality. But no, we find out this man was just built different from day one. I really love this part. It's these unexpected twists that keep adding layers to his character, making him both unpredictable and endlessly entertaining. When Jingque hit Skott with the Naruto special, it completely changed his attitude. He actually apologized, became a better person and stuck to his word. When he wins, he doesn't humiliate the loser, and instead, he even teaches them how to become a mech pilot. When he loses, he still keeps his promise and barks like a dog. In the final encounter, after he gets messed up badly by Marge and her friends, he's not even angry. Instead, he respects their dedication. What makes Skott so entertaining is his unpredictability. You never know how he's going to react, and when he does, it's always ridiculously over the top and hilarious. His reactions, paired with his voice actors, who really get to go wild in every language, makes Skott one of the most entertaining NPCs around. Which finally brings me to the last point of this already far too long essay. I mentioned this in the beginning, the unique things NPCs can do that regular playable characters simply can't. Normally, being an NPC has zero advantages. You think a real world is full of inequality? Well, in the world of gacha games, it's even worse. NPCs live alongside people who are pretty much chosen by God. Characters who are infinitely stronger, more important, and even better looking than they are. So what's the big advantage of being an NPC? It's freedom. NPCs offer more freedom for the writers, to be precise. Playable characters tend to follow certain guidelines. If you look closely, you'll notice a pattern. Playable characters are usually conventionally attractive, slim, and young. They aren't in relationships and are, at the very least, on good terms with the main character. NPCs, however, can break these molds. They can be flawed, irredeemable villains or antagonists. They can explore actual relationships, have different skin tones or body types, or are very flexible in the way they are treated. An NPC doesn't need to be sympathetic to the main character. In fact, one of the unique freedoms NPCs have is that they don't have to care about the feelings of the player base. Gacha game players can be notoriously fragile, easily upset, and highly sensitive to how playable characters interact with the main character. Writers often are careful, avoiding characters that are too mean, too antagonistic, or, worst of all, hints of romantic relationships in the past, all to avoid upsetting players. Skott, on the other hand, doesn't need to care about any of that. He's the freest man in the world. He can be as mean, raw, and antagonistic to the main character or other playable character as he pleases. He can be humiliated, defeated, and ridiculed in ways that playable characters never could be. The writers have total creative freedom with him because they don't have to worry about making Skott a marketable, high-selling character. For me, it can sometimes feel inauthentic when a character you've just met treats you like a lifelong friend. While there's nothing wrong with that, Skott's attitude feels refreshing by comparison. He's not there to be likable, which ironically makes him very likable. Did the writers plan for Skott to become this popular? It's hard to say for sure, but it's clear they had fun writing him, which might be why he ended up getting so much attention in the event. I'm pretty sure we'll see Skott again in a future event, or maybe even in a Trailblaze continuance quest. And the writers still have a lot of freedom with his character. He could stay the same, unapologetic scumbag, or he could evolve, maybe even working with the main character and showing real growth, which is probably more development than most playable characters have. Either way works because, at the end of the day, he's still an NPC, one that we love.